Hi, it's Chris with Implied Music. Today I want to talk about crunch. Not crunch like electric guitar crunch, but crunch, chord voicing crunch. Chord voicing's how we arrange the notes in our chords, and crunch particularly comes from dissonance, from the interaction of dissonant intervals, seconds, sevenths, ninths, tritones, thirteenths. Those notes add color and spice to any chord. In traditional European music theory, dissonances should be prepared and resolved. But I'll just say this, these days, we can have those notes just kind of appear in voicings or in instrumental forms just as color. Well, if you don't know exactly what I mean by this, I hope by the end of the video you will. And I've got 6 examples to look at how crunchy chords can be, well, just beautiful. Listen, I want to get right into it, and I want to show you an example of crunch in a chord voicing. Now, just a C major triad like this could be extended with a 7th or a 9th. We could even go further, add a sharp 11, and you can hear the dissonance there, and even a 13th. In fact, there's a world where all of those notes kind of live together, and there are some strong dissonances, especially when I take notes from the top and fold them down into the bottom. Those are crunchy intervals. I will say that in the context of this sort of beautiful reverbed piano part, it sounds kind of lovely, right? And I sort of think that's the secret. That what we're doing here is saying, with repetition, asserting that it's a good thing, we're saying, listen to this B flat major chord. It's a beautiful sound, isn't it? Listen to this E flat major 7 chord. Isn't it lovely? And suddenly I have this dissonant interval sitting in the middle of my voicing, and it still feels elegant and beautiful. So those dissonances can be just gorgeous, right? I mean, listen, look at how the major and minor seconds that exist within that phrase that I just played create, stacks of notes that, just seem to be like just a run of scale degrees. And I guess that's the last thing I want to say as we go forward into looking at our examples. It's this. I'm thinking in terms of modes or scales, right? I'm not just kind of randomly mashing down a bunch of notes. Well, it's kind of good, although it sounds like someone let a raccoon loose in the piano. And there's plenty of examples of 20th century classical, neoclassical music that uses stuff that sounds like that. I don't know what I just did, to sort of, get you into a sort of a weird non-tonal space. I'm essentially saying this is a kind of tonality. It's a modal tonality in which the terrain of a scale, say for instance, a B-flat Ionian scale, becomes how I operate. And so a set of dissonances within that context describes the scale, and our ear is really kind of happy to hear that. I'm leveraging the expectations of the listener's ear around scale and mode to create dissonant tonalities, which are still beautiful. Let's look at the examples. Well, my first example is a sort of a modal shifting around that same idea. I've got this persistent B in the center, and it's going to repeat. And then notes from the C major scale around it. And then just a simple shift to the parallel minor. And then back again. Now just add notes from the C scale, the G on top. Back again to C minor. Several things make this listenable, make it beautiful. The repetition of a kind of a pedal tone, the B and the B flat. The repetition of the instrumental form, the familiar pattern of playing. And then that sort of steady, perseverating rhythm kind of moves us forward as well. So we have this sense of solidity and a strong container, even with the dissonance. I think it's really crucial when we're doing music like this to have some elements which are real stable, friendly, draw in the ear, and others which are maybe a little unsettling. It's kind of a balance. Everybody's aesthetic is going to be a little different around that. This is where your artistry can begin to come in. Let's go to the next example. My next example uses this major second on the top, and you can see it hanging out up here. It's almost like a ride cymbal. It's a slow one, quarter notes and stuff. And then shifting triads, chords underneath it. Those chords may have a real dissonance. The top line is actually more than just a major second. It's really this pattern here. And once that pattern's established, the triads, these three bottom notes, sort of figure along with it. So it's a two-hand concept. Sometimes things are major, sometimes they're minor, like right there. Well, I just want to keep it interesting, that's all. And that figure on the top never changes. And then we're going to resolve G major. There's something sort of epic about that. And I think it's probably worth looking at the triads or the chords that are flowing underneath it a little more closely. As you can see, the first thing that happens is this B flat sound. And then C. And then G. And then D. So I don't know, it sort of has there's a little bit of a plagal chain there, isn't there? And it's kind of a rock and roll sound. I mean, you know, I don't know exactly what key we would say we're in. To me, it feels a little G-ish, but it's hard to say that for a fact. And then the B flat chord that appeared here now gets replaced by F minor, right? And then G minor here to D. So there's a kind of a minor shadow to the initial major statement. All the while, up on the top, the C and the D major second giving a kind of a propulsion to it all. Simple triads, but those extra notes dissonant to the chords. Back to B flat major. And then F minor 6 to C. And then kind of a release, B flat, C, and it does resolve to G, doesn't it? But that C on the top always being a little bit irritating. Well, listen, before we go on, I just want to say if this is the second or third video of mine you've seen and you're getting something out of the channel, and I hope you are, and you're not subscribed, subscribe now. Please leave me a comment. I want to hear what you're working on, and I want to know what you think about this kind of approach. This is music theory. It's like a kind of a non-academic music theory. It's what I'm interested in. I'll just say that. And I'm hoping that by talking about this kind of stuff, there'll be support for your own work. I think this is a theory that's designed to support musicians who want to understand what it is they kind of already do, maybe put words to something that they, kind of been working with for a while so that you can move forward, get something done today, get something exciting and interesting going that's your own. I hope this is music theory for everyone. Well, let's take a look at the next example. Well, you remember the major sevens from the initial review. Well, here's B major 7, E flat major 7. Great combination. This is a mediant modulation. And the dissonances, the half steps, kind of create a parody, a sort of a sense of equanimity between these two different chords. They're both major 7 chords, and so we kind of accept them in their own world. It's a homogeneous chord concept. Two major 7 chords, so there's a balance between the two chords. If one was major 7 and the other one was minor 7 flat 5, say, your ear would be struggling to try to put them into the same or some diatonic system. And of course, they don't really exist in any diatonic system together when they're both major 7s. And so you just have to take them on face value. Let's listen to the last sequence one more time. So there's A major 7 and then collapse back E flat major 7. Very interesting. A. And it resolves to B. And ends on E flat. Wow, right? Listen, we're going to roll right forward. One triad, a different triad. You sort of add them all up, you get a stack of things that's kind of interesting. This is a polychord. Polychords will always be dissonant. They'll have seconds everywhere. And especially here where I've interlocked the hands or interlocked the parts. And this is a simple sort of 2 against 3 rhythm, which gives us a little bounce and a little propulsion. Minor becomes major and then back to major, or major becomes minor and then back to major. Again, the very strong instrumental form, the way I played the chords, the pattern, the rhythm, super steady against the truth of a fairly dissonant chord set, right? Any polychord, right? E major against, say, F sharp major. That's going to be a good, there's a lot in there, a lot of seconds just crushed in together, right? E major, F sharp major, over B flat. Boy, that doesn't make sense. I hate the spelling in this. I use this app underneath, the keyboard app here. It's called Chordy app. And if it knows this is an F sharp major chord, and it does, why does it spell it F sharp, B flat, D flat? These are questions for the ages. Listen, the classic crunch sound is a dominant chord. This is C dominant. There's the E and the B flat, the 3rd and 7th. And so what I've done is to give myself a set of tritones, A and E flat, that just descend chromatically, and that takes me around the circle of fifths. So that tritone from F7, so the tritone from B flat 7, you get the idea, right? Now, when you do that, you get a real crunchy sound. I put the roots in here so that you can really see the chord progression. And then I've just injected, that's kind of a B7 sound to E7, and it's just going to go right around the circle. Sometimes the F blues scale doesn't work perfectly, but it's still kind of cool. all dominant chords. Dominant chords, crunchy by design. I've got one last example. So this example is kind of the reverse of the thing that we did before, where there's a little pattern with a major second on top and triads underneath. This time, we've got a pedal tone E just sitting down at the bottom. And we've got, I guess, what I would describe as what feels to me like fairly conventional 2/5s, although one time it resolves kind of one way and another time it resolves a different way, kind of in the E world. And as a result of the pedal tone being against those chords, we're going to get some strong dissonances, and yet it sounds kind of beautiful. Sort of has a severance quality, doesn't it? And then the same progression, but inverted. Now it's interlocked with the top note. And a major 7 chord to finish out that minor second between the root and the leading tone. Crunch is a relative thing, and I think there's going to be disagreement about what sounds dissonant to different ears. You know, I teach students as young as 5 years old, and a student that age will, the only thing that they say sounds good is something like a fifth. Even a fourth might sound a little dissonant to some students. Forget about thirds. If you add a major 7, they'll absolutely say that's not right, right? And as my ear has matured and as I've aged, I'm much more accepting of extensions on chords and complicated, saturated modal sounds. So I'm down with 6 or 7 notes, different notes, all at once, as long as I feel like they've been managed within the framework of a mode that's sensible to the, semantics of my piece. I've developed a kind of a musical syntax for myself that's permitted all this to happen. And I don't think this would be maybe right for every musical style. That said, I think crunch in chords is crucial. I mean, the classic country piano Floyd riff starts with a 9 up to the 3rd, right? There's a lot of room for crunch in simple and beautiful parts. I hope this has been useful. Like and subscribe, ding the bell, the things we do on YouTube, and I'll see you next time.